Hi again. So I want to go through the third passage. This was the most difficult, I think, of the three passages, and that's because it's scientific in nature. If you scroll down or read through, you'll see that it's from The Theory of Everything, and it's by Stephen Hawking. So immediately when I read that, I was sort of prepared to have to read through dense language. Um, Sometimes, if you're familiar with the topic, it sort of prepares you for how much reading and rereading you're going to have to look out for. So, again, the first thing I did was I skimmed through the um, the passage. The other cool thing that I did is I looked and noticed at what the subheadings were doing. And so, what was interesting for me is the way that the subheadings sort of um, weren't really talking about like literally what the passage or what the paragraphs were talking about, right? Do not attempt to adjust the picture is more commentary on what the author is talking about when it comes to the matrix and goldfish. So for me, that was just interesting. The other thing that I noticed right away was how, for me, interesting it was to start off with this bit about goldfish and this surprising fact about barring pet owners from keeping goldfish in curved fish bowls. So those are things that I would have noted on my whiteboard. Now I'm going to go to the questions. So the first question is, the author's anecdote about pet owners serves to introduce what? Is it a proof of a universal worldview, measure that is objectionable to scientists, central question about the way we see, philosophical question about what we value? So, the thing about this kind of question is it's essentially asking you to talk about what this supporting detail, what central idea this supporting detail is supporting, right? So, when you see this question, what you're really being asked to do is figure out what the main idea is. And the main idea of this passage is absolutely the way that we perceive things and how perception is, in a way, connected to some sort of reality. So the correct answer would be three. Um, it's not really about scientists. It's not really about what we value, because there's no mention about one perception being more valuable than the other. And in fact, Hawking is saying that there is no real universal worldview, so this wouldn't be right either. So the answer again is choice two. Oh, sorry, choice three. Just so that you see, choice three. All right. The primary purpose of lines 9 through 14 is to clarify the what. So again, this is a supporting sentence or a supporting detail kind of question. So let's go to lines 9 through 14. In physics, the question is not academic. Indeed, physicists and cosmologists are finding themselves in a similar predicament to the goldfishes. For decades, we have strived to come up with an ultimate theory of everything, one complete and consistent set of fundamental laws of nature that explain every aspect of reality. It now appears that this quest may yield not a single theory, but a family of interconnected theories, each describing its own version of reality, as if it viewed the universe through its own fishbowl. So, what's happening here? Well, the number one thing that I notice is Hawking is trying to connect the goldfish anecdote to physicists and what they do um, when they're creating theories. So, what I learned from the goldfish anecdote is everyone sees things differently, right? So, if he's connecting that to the world of a physicist, he's essentially talking about how physicists also can theorize things differently, right? So there's no one single theory that all physicists can agree on, just like there's no one perception that humans can all agree on. It or one reality that humans can all agree on. It depends on your perception. So having sort of thought through that, let's look at my choices. Okay, so is it clarifying the need for a single theory? Not at all. It's not talking about us needing a single theory. In fact, he's sort of talking about the opposite. Um, is it clarifying the role of the senses in understanding? Not really. There's not much mention of senses. Possibility of other life in the universe? No, that's not the primary focus of those lines. Is it trying to give you the origin of alternative theories? Absolutely. It's absolute. I would say this should have been easier of the questions here because all of these responses should have immediately been eliminated. The only thing that these lines or this paragraph is doing is talking to you about how physicists come up with different theories. All right, so number 17, and I believe this is the one that Pam said was the most difficult. So let's read through it. How do lines 17 through 19 develop a claim? So how about for this one, I look at my choices first. So do lines 17 through 19 provide details about a philosophical challenge faced by scientists? Does it show scientists should handle alternate realities? Does it argue an approach that scientists have always followed? Or does it explain how scientists should view a philosophical approach? Okay, so you would ideally have this in front of you as you scroll up. Line 17 through 19. All right, I'm going to read the whole paragraph. This notion may be difficult for many people, including some working scientists, to accept. Most people believe that there is an objective reality out there and that our senses and our science directly convey information about the material world. Most people believe. So people believe there is an objective reality and that our senses and our science directly convey information about the material world. Classical science is based on the belief that an external world exists whose properties are definite and independent of the observer who perceives them. In philosophy, that belief is called realism. Okay, so the important thing here to sort of uh, deal with is we're talking about the fact that people want to believe there's one truth. People want to believe that there's one reality. Now, I feel like this is a little bit of a trick question because you can't just read this paragraph to contextualize what's happening. In the paragraph before this, he's talking about how we need to understand that there's not a single theory, but that everything is that everyone has their own perception, right? So he talks about how we're all in fishbowls. And then the paragraph that follows is talking about why people want to believe, or rather, it's talking about the fact that people want to believe that there's one single reality. Um, so that connection is an important one to make so that when we see this question, we understand that the claim, that's another thing you have to do, the claim that Hawking is making is that scientists don't necessarily want to believe that there is not one objective truth. Or, in other words, scientists want to believe there's one objective truth. So, if that's a claim that he's making, how do those lines help him support that claim? Well, it's not arguing for an approach that scientists have always followed, because in fact, it's talking about the fact that, well, first of all, that wouldn't help support his claim, but also he's not arguing for this belief that scientists have. Um, it's showing how scientists should handle alternate realities. In that part specifically, that's not what's happening. By explaining how scientists should view a philosophical approach, that's not what he's doing either technically in that specific line. He's talking about he's talking about how they feel, He's not talking about how they should feel, right? And so then the only option we have is providing details about a philosophical challenge faced by scientists. So if I wanted to make the claim that scientists believe there's one objective truth, one way I can support that claim is giving you details about this philosophical challenge that they have. Um, in in other words, I want to prove to you that scientists want to believe there's one truth, and so how I'm going to do it is by talking to you about why they have to believe this, the challenge they face uh, in questioning this idea of one universal truth. So the answer again is choice one. The reference to the matrix in lines 20 through 24 is used to emphasize the questioning of our. Now, for me, this was super easy because matrix, it's not about education, it's not about ideals, it's not about virtues, it's all about perception. So, and I don't think a lot of us got this wrong, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Number 19, the references to goldfish in lines 33 through 42 contribute to the author's purpose by suggesting that. So what you have to do here is you have to figure out what is the author's purpose. The author's purpose is to talk about how perception dictates reality. And now we have to figure out what lines 33 through 42 are doing to support this, this main idea. So let's go to 33 and 42. The goldfish are in similar situations. Their view is not the same as ours from outside their curved bowl, but they could still formulate scientific laws governing the motion of the objects they observe on the outside. For instance, because light bends as it travels from air to water, a freely moving object that we would observe to move in a straight line would be observed by the goldfish to move along a curved path. The goldfish could formulate scientific laws from their distorted frame of reference that would always hold true and that would enable them to make predictions about the future motion of objects. I would reread this probably 4 times to find out that what he's doing is he's imagining that scientists were goldfish and the way in which a scientist could easily be in a fishbowl but also easily be a moving object outside of the fishbowl, and how that sort of determines the theories that they come up with. So, that being said, the purpose of the passage is to talk about perception, and those specific lines really highlight the fact that people's theories are influenced by their viewpoints, right? The whole bit about, if you're standing outside of the fishbowl, the light determines how you see things, how your reality. That's all part of people's theories are influenced by their viewpoints. It's not choice number 2. There's nothing about mysteries. It's not saying that the only way you can determine a reality is by being outside, because the fish is inside and outside. And it's not focused on light being like, it is talking about light, but the goldfish is being used not to talk about light. Well, really, the reason why it's not this one is it has nothing to do with the main idea of perception. Um, so that's why this would be eliminated. The choice would have to be 1. So just to recap that, the purpose of the whole passage is to talk about the way perception impacts reality. So therefore, when the goldfish is used, it's helping support that purpose by showing the way theories are influenced by our viewpoints. Okay? All right. As used in line 45 of the text, what does the word coherent mean? Now, this one is just a vocabulary thing. Coherent, you can go up and read the line. There's no other option other than understandable. I would say the thing here is coherent really only means understandable. According to based on the options I have, coherent can mean unified. The other possible word could be balanced, but even that is not a definition. a common definition of coherent. So I wouldn't necessarily even have to look at line 45. I immediately see here that the only definition that's presented here that matches coherent is understandable. The author's reference to a collection of maps is used to help clarify what. So let's go to line 64. And again, a little bit above. Thus, M theory is not a theory in the usual sense, but a network of theories. It is a bit like a map. So again, map is being connected to theories. To faithfully represent the entire Earth on a flat surface, one has to use a collection of maps, each of which covers a limited region. The maps overlap one another, and where they do, they show the same landscape. So it's being connected to theory. So what are my options? I have two options with the word theory in it. Is it talking about the limitations of previous theories? Not really. It's not using the idea of maps to talk about how theories can be limiting, but in fact using the idea of maps to show how theory can be very complex. So the choice is choice number 1. The functions of line 73 through 77 is to, let's go up, and I would read the whole paragraph here, but for the sake of brevity, it might be that to describe the universe we have to employ different theories in different situations. Each theory may have its own version of reality, but according to model-dependent realism, that diversity is acceptable and none of the versions could be said to be more real than any other. It is not the physicist's traditional expectation for a theory of nature, nor does it correspond to our everyday idea of reality, but it might be the way of the universe. So, what's going on here? Hawking is sort of summarizing every theory has its own relationship to reality, and that no one version of reality can be said to be more real than any other. So let's look at what my options are. What are these lines doing? Are they arguing for a specific theory? Not at all. And you'll see that this is the automatic wrong answer, and there are variations of this throughout all of these questions, right? It's not about needing specific theory. It's about the fact that that is impossible. Is it suggesting that theories relate to expectations? Never really mentions expectations, so that wouldn't be the case either. Is it describing the way differing theories should coexist? Yes. And if you're unsure, you can look at the fourth choice. Is it evaluating theories based on specific needs? No, there's no mention of evaluation. So the only thing that's happening there is description. Also notice your choices for this question and for this question. You can look at the verb, right? When you go back through lines 73 through 77, there's no sense that anyone's arguing anything. There's no sense that anyone is evaluating anything. There is a sense maybe that there's some suggestion, and there is a sense that there's some description. So I have eliminated two choices, and now I have to go and see, well, what are you saying it suggests? And then I realize, wait, there's no suggestion of expectations, so then that gets thrown away too. So a lot of times the verbs can help you figure out what should be eliminated, especially a strong verb like argue. If there's no argument being made, right, then that's automatically out. Okay. Oh, so just so we understand, the choice would be choice number 3. With which statement would the authors most likely agree? So this is called a global question. You're all familiar with that from the workshop. And so the question you're being asked is, based on the whole paper, what would the author agree with? Would the author agree with the idea that the perception of the universe can never be changed? or sorry, can never be questioned? Absolutely not. He would disagree with this. Would he agree with there is a single agreed upon theory of reality? Absolutely not. He would disagree with this. Would he agree with multiple realities that are possible to prove? Absolutely not, because if realities are based in perception, right, it's really hard to prove that other than that's the perception of the person giving the reality. So the only then option I'm left with is the understanding of the universe continues to change. And so that would be the correct answer. And then finally, the authors attempt to engage the audience through the use of absolute statements. Nope. Real world examples. Well, there is that bit about the Matrix and Italy and goldfish. Detailed descriptions. There are descriptions. Um, Simple questions. Not at all. The question of is there a theory of everything is very complicated. So the two that I'm left with are real world examples and detailed descriptions. Now, what you want to do is understand the question. How could you engage an audience? Could you engage an audience by giving them detailed descriptions? Sure. But could you engage them even more by giving them real world examples? Absolutely. Especially if you think about the fact that this is a passage on physics. So detailed descriptions is not necessarily going to get you as large of an audience as real world examples. And so for that reason, it's choice number 2. All right. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to either email me, comment on this YouTube video, or talk to Michelle about maybe some clarifying questions that I still haven't answered. Be well and best of luck on Saturday.